occurred right here in this very hospital almost 14 years ago. I can look back at those days now at what I thought was the most difficult time of our lives was actually God painting a perfect masterpiece for our lives. As tragedy and the miracles that would come into our lives. Because you see, if we take a step back and look at the whole picture God is painting, we can see each and every stroke of the color, each detail of the picture. It's hard to do when you're in the midst of that tragedy and the heartache. I know that firsthand. But I stand here almost 14 years later at the very hospital where our story began. Not knowing at the time what God had in store for our lives. But for these next few minutes, I want to share with you my heart. I want to be real with you. There's no candy coating the story because it's definitely not been a box of chocolates. It's been hard and it's been a struggle most of the time. But I do hope that it brings you hope, joy, and even in the struggles that you may face in your own lives. I hope that through my eyes, you see God most of all, but that you see how fragile life is and never take one moment for granted, because in an instant, it can all be quickly ripped away from you. None of us are invincible. We're not exempt from tragedy or heartache, but it's what we choose to do with those heartbreaking moments that count. Make those moments count, the good and the bad. You know, I thought at one time it could never happen to me. I never dreamed I would stand in rooms of hospitals, memorial services, in churches, full of people time and time again, sharing the death and the life of my little girl. I never dreamed I would never get to see her grow up, go to her first prom, graduate high school, go off to college, and someday fall in love and get married and have children of her own. But that wasn't the path God had for her or our family. His path for her would reach more people and affect lives in ways through her death that could have never been reached any other way. When our family's journey began right here at Walker Baptist, it was in the ER on September 8th, 2001. As I embark on our journey, I hope you find and know that each of you are making a difference in the lives of others. You guys are those unknown heroes that I know many times doesn't get the opportunity to see the results are from not only the job you do, but the love and the compassion that you show to parents just like us. Savannah was a little girl from the day she was born, stole everyone's heart. Savannah was our miracle baby. The baby that the doctors had only given us 30% chance of having after a tubal reversal. But on Christmas Day of 2000, only 12 days after the doctor released us to start trying to get pregnant, that little pregnancy stick came up positive. This would be the most awesome gift God would ever give us. This baby would forever change our lives. We just didn't know how much it would change our lives. It was a rough pregnancy, to say the least. I'd come down with viral meningitis about halfway through the pregnancy and was in bed sick for over a month. I had developed Graves' disease when I was 21 and heart arrhythmia problems at the age of 20. And as I got older, those issues only got worse, and pregnancy seemed to really put it into overdrive. But during my pregnancy with Savannah, those issues were taking havoc on my body. We got through those days with a lot of prayer and trusting God to carry us to my delivery date. But on August 26, 2001, Savannah was born perfect and beautiful. I do not think I could have imagined the love and the joy that I saw in her daddy's face that day she was born. I'll never forget, after he held her for the first time, Stephen literally fell to his knees, hands raised in the air, thanking God for her. Those first 2 weeks would be the most amazing 2 weeks, although we had no idea that our joy would be short-lived because our world was fixing to come crashing down around us. On Saturday, September 8, 2001, Savannah became very sick, throwing up violently and crying constantly. As I began to try to come up with some explanation of why she went from being just a happy little baby that never cried to a screaming like she was in just terrible pain, in my heart of hearts, I had a bad gut feeling something was wrong. We made the decision to take her to the ER here at Walker Baptist. We just assumed that y'all would figure it out, fix it, send her home. But our assumption was totally wrong. The nurses began to try to draw blood, but Savannah had become so dehydrated from throwing up so much. Excuse me. It took 3 nurses trying before they could even get blood from her. As we waited and prayed for the results to come back, it seemed like hours, but in reality, it was less than an hour. The doctor working the ER that night was Dr. Charles Shipman, which many of you, I'm sure, know. When he came into the examining room, I could tell by the look on his face what he had to tell us wasn't good. He looked at us with almost dread in his eyes and said, I honestly have no idea what's wrong with her, but I do know whatever it is taking havoc on her little body, and there is something seriously wrong with her. I've called for an ambulance, and we are rushing her to Children's Hospital. The doctors there in the ER are expecting her and will be waiting to take her immediately. I stood there in disbelief and crying, telling myself, no, we're just supposed to figure this out, get it fixed, and go home. The nurses began to console me, telling me everything was going to be okay. The team of nurses and Dr. Shipman wasted no time with Savannah. They knew something was wrong and moved heaven and earth to see that she was taken care of. As I rode in that ambulance, laid on that stretcher with Savannah strapped to my stomach, all I could do was cry. I tried to pray, but nothing came out. Only tears seemed to fall, because this couldn't be happening to us, not to Savannah. I know that even though I couldn't muster any words through prayer, God could hear what I was crying out to him in my heart. We arrived at Children's Hospital in 23 minutes, although it seemed like hours. Soon as the ambulance door was open, they grabbed Savannah out of my arms and took off, literally running with her. I stood there for a minute or two trying to get my composure back, and as I looked up to all of heaven and said, God, this is your daughter, the one we prayed for, that you gave us. Please, God, whatever is wrong, heal her. If it's a miracle we need, then I ask you for it. It would be several hours before the doctors would have any word for us. The wait was almost unbearable, but the answers we were hoping for didn't come. They were running a lot of tests, but at that point they had no idea what was wrong with her, just that she was deathly sick and declining rapidly. On September 11, 2001, finally they figured out what was wrong. She had developed a flesh-eating bacteria called necrotizing fasciitis. Her umbilical cord had fallen off on Friday before she became sick. They determined that somehow when her umbilical cord was cut in delivery, that something unsterilized had come in contact with it. This particular infection had a 2-week incubation period, and Savannah, now 2 weeks old, they set Savannah up for surgery on September 11, 2001, to do exploratory surgery and to take a biopsy. This infection was literally eating away her internal organs. Our country was under attack. The Twin Towers had been hit. The Pentagon had been hit. A plane had been hijacked. A plane had crashed in Pennsylvania. Over 3,000 people had died. People were missing. Families were destroyed. Over 400 police officers and firefighters had been killed. But all I could see and feel was the disease that had hit our beautiful little girl. The disease that the doctors had told us in less than an hour was going to kill her. After Savannah came out of surgery, they put her in SICU. The doctors looked at us and said, we've done all we can do. She's not responding to the antibiotics. So prepare yourselves. She will probably never go back home. By this point, Savannah's stomach had turned black as coal, with blisters all over it about the size of a saucer. Her little body had swollen so much she didn't even look human anymore. We wasn't allowed to hold her anymore because the infection and the amount of pain her little body was enduring. All I knew is this couldn't be happening. Not to her, not to our miracle baby, the ones that the doctor said we probably would never have. Why was God allowing this to happen? Why was he going to take her from us? That night, she was in SIU. I don't think I slept at all in that waiting room. By morning, she had declined terribly. We had made arrangements to get a room at the Ronald McDonald House. After the last visit of our second night in SICU, my mom, my best friend, and my grandmother went to eat. As we sat in this restaurant, an elderly couple walked up to our table. The man looked at me. I looked up at him with tears streaming down my face. And he said, "Sweetheart, did I overhear you say your little girl was in a hospital?" I told the man, "Yes, sir." He then said, "Do you mind if my wife and I prayed for you and your little girl?" I accepted his offer graciously. After the couple prayed, I looked up at this couple, and I saw an angelic glow about them. It sounds crazy, but this couple had literally had a light beam around them. This lady looked at me with eyes of pure compassion, and the love of God was so evident in this lady. She said, "Sweetie, when you get back to that hospital to see your daughter, God said to tell you, you will lay hands on her belly, and you simply say, 'In the name of Jesus, you are healed.'" I agreed as they turned and left, wishing a million times over that day I had asked their names, phone numbers. Now this couple had no idea that the infection had started on her belly, or what her belly even looked like at this point, yet that is where they told me to lay my hands and pray. The next morning, as I ran into Savannah's little room, the nurse began to speak to me, but I quickly raised my hand and told her, "Wait a minute, I got something I got to do first." The nurse kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't allow that to stop me. I laid my hands on her little infected belly and repeated those words, "In the name of Jesus, you are healed." I then looked at the nurse, who by this time was smiling at me, and she said, "I don't know how it is possible. The antibiotics aren't working on her. There's nothing left that we can do for her, but she's making a turnaround. She's had a great night." 5 days later, Savannah beat the odds. Doctors and nurses from all over Children's Hospital was coming into her room to see her because they just couldn't believe that she had recovered from this. But 5 days after I laid my hands on my daughter's stomach, she went home. Savannah would have scars that would remain on her stomach, but as she began to grow and understand what and how God had healed her, she would raise her little shirt up to anyone that was look and listen and show off her scars and tell everyone she met, "This is where Jesus healed me." Her survival rate had been less than 30%. That infection was literally eating away at her internal organs. And I want you to remember this, the very thing that this infection was doing to her internal organs. 5 years later, God's going to use the very thing that almost took her life. Why, I asked many times after that, did God heal her then to take her from me 5 years later? Because once again, he was painting that perfect masterpiece. Those vital organs that the infection was trying to destroy, God stopped it in its tracks because there was going to be 2 people who would need a kidney transplant, a little girl who would need a liver transplant, 2 people who would need to see again, and others who would need heart valve replacements. Savannah had her special place in each of her family's life. She was Daddy's little princess. She would distract her daddy playing Candyland so she could move her piece further up the road when her daddy was looking. Yes, she learned to cheat real early. She always seemed to win. She was Sissy's Pirates of the Caribbean movie buddy, and oh, those ungodly wiggles she loved so much. But her and her big Sissy knew every song, and they would spend hours painting each other's nails and putting on makeup. She was Bubba's little buddy to play hide and seek with and beat him at playing video games. She was Mommy's shopping buddy, and we would go to yard sales on Saturdays. Although if we ever passed one on the way to school, she couldn't understand why we couldn't stop. "Just write me a note, Mom." She didn't understand that the school wasn't going to take an excuse for we stopped at a yard sale. We shoed, shopped, purse shopped to our heart's content. She would steal her papa's chocolate and watch strange sci-fi movies with her Grammy on Friday nights. She loved helping her nanny and Papa in the garden. Savannah loved her church family and was always excited when Wednesday and Sunday rolled around. She would tell you those were her favorite days. She loved to camp, and oh my goodness, at the stories that campground could tell. She'd cry every time we left. She just loved being there that much. And if you didn't watch her like a hawk, she would be up in someone else's tent or their camper, just carrying on a conversation and eating with them. Many times we went looking for her, and you'd find her sitting at somebody's table eating a hot dog. You ask her, Savannah, do you know them? I do now, they're my friend. She never had any fear of anyone or anything. To her, the world was perfect. To her, everyone was her friend. I'll never forget one Sunday afternoon 6 weeks before Savannah passed away. We was on our way to Walmart after church to buy groceries. She looks at me and says, Mommy, I got something very important I need to do. I replied to her, Savannah, just what do you have that's so important? She said, Mommy, I need to give my heart to Jesus so that when I die, I know for sure I'm going to heaven. That Sunday, I got the greatest joy a parent could ever get, and that was to pray and lead my daughter to Christ. Exactly 1 month before she passed away, on April 15th, 2007, our daughter Savannah Faith Sides made a decision that will forever alter our lives. I was online signing my husband Stephen, my oldest daughter Kayla, who was then 17, and our son Micah, who was then 15, and myself to be organ donors. Savannah, our 5-year-old daughter, came into the computer room and said, Mommy, what are you doing? I told her, I'm signing Daddy, Sissy, Bubba, and Mommy up to be organ donors. Savannah looked up at me and said, I want to do that. I looked at her thinking she just didn't understand what I was doing, and I told her, you're a mommy's baby. We have a long time to worry about that. Savannah then looked at me again, and I will never forget that look in her eyes, or the words she said to me as long as I live. Mommy, you need to sign me up too. I won't need them when I get to heaven. She's had so much sincerity and compassion in her eyes and in her heart. I set her up in my lap to explain to her exactly what organ donation was all about. She looked at me once again saying, Mommy, you need to sign me up now. It's important because I'm not going to need them when I get to heaven. How could I say no after that remark? So that day, on April 15, 2007, my entire family became organ donors. I never gave it another thought. Besides, we had many, many years to ever worry about becoming a donor. On May 15, 2007, exactly 1 month later, we would have to stand by the decision that Savannah had made. On May 15, 2007, at 7:25 a.m., our lives turned upside down and inside out. Life as we knew it was no more. I was on my way to carry Savannah to school. She was finishing up her kindergarten year at Curry. She was proud and excited. School was almost out for the summer, and she had done very well for her first year of school. Savannah's teacher always called her her little social butterfly. But that Tuesday morning was just like any typical day, the rushing around and trying to hurry. As I put Savannah in her car seat, I pulled out of the driveway, and in 5 short miles, it was about to change. That morning, as I drove the next 5 miles, Savannah was chattering about her field trip that morning, or for the next morning at the Birmingham Zoo. I saw the van coming around a curve on the wrong side of the road. I remember screaming, trying to dodge it, and it was over. My next memory is waking up screaming and crying out to God, please take care of my baby. I heard a voice. It was just a whisper. I looked towards Savannah's side of the car, and the lady said, sweetheart, you keep on praying. God is going to take care of your baby. I would later get to meet the lady who was there, and she was a nurse. And she is such an important part of my life now. That was the last memory I had of that awful day. 2 weeks later, I woke up from a drug-induced coma to find out my little girl, our miracle baby, our gift from God, was gone. I didn't even realize the extent of my own injuries, nor that I had been fighting for my own life. I sure didn't realize 2 weeks had passed. I remember screaming and screaming. The tears wouldn't stop. Life stopped right there. It was over, and I didn't want to live anymore. My husband stood by Savannah's decision to be an organ donor. He said he would never forget the look on the doctors' faces when they told him Savannah had no brain activity. The trauma she suffered had been extensive. He now needed to make the decision to take her off life support. He told the doctors Savannah wanted to help others. Who can she help? The doctors were amazed and shocked, actually questioning his comment. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Stephen replied, yes, Savannah wanted to be an organ donor. Can she help anyone? The doctors then put everything into motion, and on that day, May 15, 2007, our little girl became 5 people's miracle. I stayed at UAB for 31 days. 14 days of that was spent in the trauma unit on life support. My body was broken into hundreds of pieces. I came home on June 15, 2007. I was bedridden for months. Those hours, days, weeks, and months ahead were so dark and dreary. I can't even begin to tell you how much my physical body was hurting, but it still did not compare to my broken and hurt heart. I've had 27 surgeries to date and lots of physical therapy over the last 8 years. I have fought long and hard to learn to walk again. Many times the pain being more than I could bear, and I wanted to give up at times, but it was definitely then that God carried me. I had begged God time and time again with all the whys. We all want to know when tragedy strikes. The answer just seemed to never come. I was beginning to think God just didn't want me to know the answer to that question. One night 4 years ago, as I laid in bed crying out to God what seemed like the hardest plea yet, I had asked him once again, God, why? Why me? As plain as the sound of my voice is to you right now, I heard in that sweet, still, small voice, why not you? I trust you, and I love you. I could have given this ministry to anyone and this testimony, but I trusted you enough to carry out my plan so that others could see me through you and Savannah, so that others could see that in the midst of their darkest days, in the midst of their hurt, that I love them, and I am here waiting, and I am carrying them every step. I cried as the answer God gave me began to sink in. Wow, he loved me enough to trust me with this? I got a little braver, and I asked him one more question. God, why did you heal Savannah at 4 weeks old to take her 5 years later? God gently reminded me, Sandy, do you remember the disease that was eating away at her internal organs? I said, yes, Lord, I remember. He then replied, Savannah had a job here on earth. She had 5 lives that would need to be saved with those organs. 2 others would need her corneas to see again. I had a plan for her life. Her faithfulness to me is still being affected by many, many lives. Sandy, you're just starting to grasp my perfect plan. Look around you. Look closely at all I've done and accomplished through Savannah. And I'm not even close to being done yet. Just hold on a little longer. Trust me. Believe me. And in my perfect plan, because in the end, you will know it has been worth it all. So it was then that I had 2 choices. I could let this destroy me and all those around me, or I could let God use it to make a difference in the lives of others. I also made another choice, and that was to let all my anger go and forgive. The lady who hit me in Savannah was a nurse right here at Walker Baptist. She had just pulled a double shift and was on her way home from work. She was also a mother of 3 and lived only 1 mile down the road from me. Our husbands were friends growing up. My sister-in-law went to church with her. I knew in my heart she never meant to hurt us that day. She is now a dear friend and someone I hold very close. She keeps in touch with me on a regular basis, and even though she's moved away since, just recently I received a message from her on Facebook, and I want to share this conversation with you just so you can understand how God can truly use 2 families that faced a tragic ordeal, that the world would normally see something come out of nothing, the bitterness, and anger and unforgiveness. This is the message I received from her. Sandy, our friendship is one of many. Many will never understand. I think of all of you every day. I especially think of Savannah multiple times while at work. I'm a triage physician now, so I'm the first person to see patients. One of the things I do because of the impact of our relationship and the things I learned about the events of Savannah becoming an organ donor is to ask every patient, no matter their age, if they are a child or not, if they are an organ donor. I also inform them that if they should change their mind or are interested, they can go to Alabama Organ Center website and sign up. I get many looks from patients and their families and coworkers for asking, but if it leads just one person to become an organ donor, then it's worth it. And should they be placed in the position to make the decision about a loved one, then they have heard it at least once. I love you guys so much. I definitely know the approach you had with this tragedy has greatly impacted my life. I could never express enough how truly sorry I am for putting your family through something so tragic. Nor can I express enough gratitude for the love and forgiveness I've always felt from you. My reply to her, I know, like you said, many don't and can't understand our friendship that God brought from all this. And many times people's jaws drop when I tell them about the forgiveness and friendship that come from it. God continues to open doors for me to share this testimony. I get opportunity to speak to hospitals for the Alabama Organ Center and to churches all over. But no matter what door God opens, I always share the story of how the power of forgiveness that God can give and will give in the midst of even the worst of tragedies. I used to think I would change this journey that God put us on, but I know in my heart I could have never learned the lessons I've learned or the meaning of unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness had I not walked it. My faith is stronger, my marriage is stronger, my walk with God is stronger, and my family is stronger. I used to think I was invincible, but I found out Satan can and will attack you at your very core. And believe me, he has tried his hardest to tear me down. And at times I felt the weight and the heartbreak was going to do just that. But I can look back at these last 8 years and see lives that God has changed through Savannah's life and her death. She's still making an impact. And as I, as her mom, can touch even half the lives she has, I know I've at least done a small part in this big plan of God's. I'm happy again. I'm smiling again. And sometimes the tears still come at those holidays, birthdays, the milestones she would now face. But I can actually smile now through those tears. I am so glad I can share my heart with you. Please know it's never to hurt you, because my friend, as the old gospel song goes, I wouldn't take nothing from my journey now. You have been a blessing and amazing these last 8 years. You made it easy for us to come to that place of forgiveness. When you came up to me sitting in my wheelchair that day in Kmart, begging me to forgive you, I am still in awe at you because I'm not sure I could have been strong enough to do that. I definitely don't have a clue how I would have reacted. You showed me more compassion than some I thought were friends to us. I love you, and I never want to lose this connection we have. It's definitely a God thing. So you see, God has taken me and her to a place of forgiveness and friendship and unconditional love. And I treasure that more than anyone can ever understand or comprehend. And as long as I have breath in me, I will hold that friendship and guard it with my life. Savannah's gift of life didn't quit giving on May 15, 2007. It didn't quit with the 5 lives she saved, because for generations to come, this gift will continue to give. It will bring one more life to be born, one more life to also become an organ donor. The list of that gift can go on and on. And as I begin recalling all God has done in our lives since Savannah's death, It would take me months to tell you, but one story that a friend told us once comes to mind. A little boy who was a friend of Savannah's at school had went to church on that Sunday morning after her funeral. He had ADHD, and normally during church he was bouncing off the walls and moving from pew to pew. But that particular Sunday morning, they said he came in very solemn and quiet. He went straight to the front pew and sat down. During the service, they said he never budged, and tears streamed down his face the entire service. At the close of the service, during the altar call, he walked up to the pastor and said, "Pastor, my friend Savannah died Tuesday, and she used to tell me about Jesus at school. I want to make sure that when I die, I go to heaven where she is." That Sunday morning, he gave his heart to Jesus. So many times I've seen Savannah at an altar of prayer at 3, 4, and 5 years old, praying for others, walking up to complete strangers and praying for them. I know Savannah looks down from heaven and has seen many of her prayers answered. And knowing that if one life was changed, then all this was worth it. Our biggest blessing came the day after riding back and forth for over a year when we got to meet Alexis Morgan, Savannah's liver recipient, and her mom. In October 2009, we met Alexis and her mom for the first time. Alexis's dad was in Afghanistan at the time. And although we had wanted to wait till all of us could be together at once, me and Stephen happened to be in the Atlanta area and called, and I asked her, could we come? And she quickly said yes. I was scared, had so many mixed emotions. What if they didn't like us? My heart was pounding as we drove into the driveway. As we got out of the car, my legs were shaking so bad I thought they were going to fall out from underneath me. But as soon as Vicki opened that door, all that anxiety left. And as I saw Alexis, this beautiful little girl that God put into our lives, Alexis took to us immediately. You would have thought she had known us all her life. Stephen played with her for hours. She became his little buddy quickly. Vicki and I sat on the couch, talking mother to mother, sharing her feelings, thoughts, fears, and their joys, and I shared mine. We laughed, we cried, but for the first time, I was starting to feel a joy in my heart I had not felt since we had lost Savannah. Watching Alexis and Stephen play brought tears to my eyes, but it was tears of joy, but yet sadness. Vicki could see it, and she took my hand and held it. Words weren't needed. She just seemed to understand. Alexis received Savannah's liver at 18 months old. She has had no rejections and is doing absolutely amazing. Alexis even took us to her room and showed us where she kept her pictures of us and pictures of Savannah and her gifts that we had sent her. They were in a very special place that no one was allowed to touch. They were her special things, and she told us that Savannah was her angel. We recently got a card, and I didn't add this in here, from her in a new school picture, and the card simply said that she wrote in her own writing, "I'm so glad that y'all are part of my family." Our oldest daughter, Kayla, got married on April 28, 2012. Alexis and her family came from Jacksonville, Florida, where they had moved now to be a part of her wedding. Alexis was Kayla's honorary junior bridesmaid, and I can't begin to tell you how special it was to have her in the most important day of my daughter's life. Alexis celebrated her 7th birthday while they were here for the wedding. Kayla had requested, instead of a rehearsal dinner, to have Alexis a surprise birthday party. I spent more on her cake than I did on my daughter's wedding cake. And my daughter still hasn't forgiven me for that. Alexis walked up to me afterwards as I was cutting her birthday cake, and she said, "Miss Sandy, can I give my new big sissy the first piece?" Kayla and I both cried over it. It touched our hearts so deeply, and she had become to look at Kayla just like Savannah, her sissy. Alexis really understood more than I even realized. Alexis just celebrated on April 28th her 10th birthday. They now live in Northern Virginia, but we continually get pictures, emails, text messages, and phone calls from her. Just a few weeks ago, I got a new school picture, which I just told you about. And it's amazing that how from the first picture we got, to the picture we have now to see all that God's done through her. And she's playing soccer, she's dancing, she's doing it all. And I've learned over these last 7 years, it's okay to cry, it's okay to hurt, it's okay to grieve, and it's okay to miss her. It's still hard at times, but I still know that it's part of God's plan. God understands my hurt. He gave up His only Son, Jesus, on the cross, so that we could have eternal life with Him. The hurting will never go away, but in the midst of this storm, God carried me. He held me while I cried. He wiped away each and every tear, and He took away all my fears. The Size family's life has changed a lot, but our children, Kayla and Micah, are now married. Kayla just gave birth to our first grandson, Grayson Andrew, who was born on February 28th. And and if you don't think that ain't the apple of our eye, he has stolen his Nana's heart. Our son Micah got married last May. His wife brought into our family a daughter, Aubrey, which is now our granddaughter. Micah and his wife are now expecting another girl in August. So we will add another granddaughter, which name will be Emmeline. I prayed and asked God for a grandbaby, and I got 3 in just a little over a year. Watch what you pray for. It'd be specific. My husband always corrects me on that because he said specific. But all the kidding aside, we are blessed to have these grandbabies, and although no one can ever take Savannah's place, these babies are really filling a huge hole in our hearts. The Alabama Oregon Center has walked this journey from day one. Every step of the way, through our darkest and most hurtful time, the compassion and love that was shown to my family still makes me stand in amazement. They were there when the miracle of Savannah's gift was given, and when we got the opportunity to first time to talk and meet with a precious little girl, Alexis. There's been times I've just called to talk to one of them at the OLC just because I needed to cry. They've always listened, let me pour my heart out. I could never repay in a million years what the ALC has done, and how their love and faith in us has just amazed me these last 8 years. Those at UAB Trauma Unit were compassionate. When they knew my husband had made the decision to take our little girl Savannah off life support at Children's Hospital, they went way beyond the call of duty to care for our family and friends and me. It wasn't just a job to them. I have heard the stories and the tears that they shed with my family. And as my family dealt not only with the unknown of whether I would survive or not, but also the loss of our daughter. You guys here at WBMC, you have worked just as hard, you were just as fast and efficient, and you held my daughter with the utmost dignity. You were compassionate. You had a huge part in keeping her alive so that Children's could use her. I've been given the blessing by meeting all those that worked my wreck that day, from the paramedics that took care of Savannah, volunteer firefighters that worked tirelessly to get me out of the car, the flight nurses that flew me by air-evac, Alabama Oregon Center that worked with my family, the nurses and doctors at Children's and UAB. To be able to hug and thank each of them was something I had longed for, and I thank God for opening each of those doors. If one of you here today was one of those nurses who took care of my little Savannah, I can't begin to thank you enough for giving of yourself to care for her the way you did and for my family. 2 years ago, I was speaking at a women's conference. A lady walks up to me and says, "Sandy, you probably don't remember me, but I was one of your trauma nurses that took care of you at UAB." I was surprised. She didn't remember me at all, much less Stephen's name. I asked her, "You take care of hundreds of patients each year. It's been almost 6 years since those trauma days. Why, of all people, would you remember us?" She told me, "I've never seen a husband nurture, care, and love anyone the way Stephen did you. I've never, in all my years of nursing, seen so many friends, family, and church family gather in waiting rooms in the midst of all their pain when Savannah passed away, they was not sure at that point if you were even going to survive. They put their mourning aside and their fears to pray for other families right there in the trauma unit. She said it affected me as it did many of the nurses and doctors during that time. This particular nurse was also one of the ones who was in the room with me when I came out of a coma and was told about Savannah. I was honored to have the opportunity to meet her and talk to her about those days. We laughed and cried. Each of you have been called by God to be a special part of the medical field. Each of you playing your part. I can't begin to imagine what y'all see day to day, or what you have to endure in the sorrow, your joys, and you see day to day. I imagine you do not get the opportunity to see the results of your patient's recovery. Maybe some of you are here today are the ones who cared for Savannah. Thank you doesn't seem to be enough for what you've given Savannah and my family. I've been given the opportunity to share to the world the miracles God has worked through all this. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for the love and the compassion you gave my family. I would not be here where I'm at today without God's healing touch and each and every one of you. Savannah became 7 people's miracle that day on May 15, 2007. She will always be her family's friend and complete stranger's hero, but each of you here are God's and my hero. I want to leave you here today with hope, courage, strength, and faith that we can lean on God and let Him carry us. We can allow God to take each circumstance to change the world and make a difference in someone's life. We all have our own testimony we need to share with others. We have no idea how much it can impact and encourage others who are hurting. I don't have all the answers of why tragedy happens. I wish I did. But I can tell you that what God has done and how He carried me through it. You guys see tragedy every day, sometimes freak accidents, sometimes senseless. Savannah got that gift of life by her own choice at 5 years old, a gift of unconditional love and compassion. She has left a legacy, and it's up to me now to carry on her legacy. Savannah's life tells a testimony and a journey, and it's my job to carry this testimony out to a hurting world. It's my job to show others the legacy that Savannah's left. My prayer today is that I leave you a legacy, that I leave my children a legacy that someday we'll look back on and be proud of. My prayer today also is that you just see how special each of you are, and that you, my dear friends, are leaving your own legacy and making a difference, not only in my family's life, but in the lives of many others. You are and forever will be one of Savannah's and my heroes.